Duke Nukem 3D has appeared on many consoles over the years. Not all of those experiences are equal to the PC outing, but they can all be fun and interesting in their own right. Well, except for maybe one. While N64, Saturn and PS1 gamers got very serviceable ports of Duke Nukem 3D, other gamers weren't quite so lucky. In 1997, Duke Nukem 3D touched down on a handheld console that felt odd to begin with, but when you see the end result, you openly wonder why anyone even bothered. I'm talking about Duke Nukem 3D for the Tiger Gamecom handheld. In order to understand what this version of Duke Nukem 3D even is, you need to understand what the Tiger Gamecom actually was. The console was made by Tiger Electronics. They had their hands in all kinds of electronics, but they're mostly known for their range of cheap electronic games in the early 1990s. They'd negotiate deals with brands like Sega to let them make these very simple games, and I use the term game in heavy quotation marks here, using their IPs. The trade-off was that these were much cheaper than established handheld consoles, like Nintendo's Game Boy, so for families looking to throw a gaming device at their child, it did its job in a pinch. And they were very successful. The likes of Street Fighter, Sonic the Hedgehog, and even Lion King got versions of these games. But by the mid-1990s, the company had bigger ambitions. It wanted to compete directly with the likes of Nintendo and Sega in the handheld gaming space, while also maintaining their reputation as being the cheaper option. In September 1997, they released the Gamecom, a handheld device that married video games with early PDFs into one chunky package. Priced at $70 in the US, it came bundled with 2 games and 4 more available to buy, usually around $20 to $30 each. Tiger promoted the console with a very aggressive TV campaign that was somewhat generous with the performance of the games. We'll talk about that in a bit, and also managed to insult gamers enough that the adverts were considered terrible for the console's reputation. But the Gamecom had some surprisingly big names in its ranks. Resident Evil 2, Sonic Jam, and Mortal Kombat Trilogy all featured among the released games. The problem was that most of its games flat out sucked. Games on the Gamecom ranged from playable to downright awful, the muddy touchscreen and poor performance handicapping the games that did appear on it. By the time the console was put out of its misery in 2000, many of the big name games that had been promised were cancelled long before the console was in the ground. It's estimated that only 300,000 consoles were ever sold worldwide. Among all this, the console ended up with a version of Duke Nukem 3D. I'm not kidding. Developed by Tiger themselves, this version of Duke 3D launched right at the back end of 1997 and was featured quite heavily in the promotion material for the console. With all that out of the way, let's dive into Duke Nukem 3D on the Gamecom. Before I get too harsh on things here, this package is admirable, if very misguided. It's trying to create a first-person experience on a device that's only ever so slightly more powerful than a Game Boy. It not only does this, but brings in a lot of recognisable things from Duke Nukem 3D. You get 3 whole episodes, all of which are lifted from the original game. Each of these episodes contains 4 levels, each titled after levels from the respective PC outings. Some of the Duke Nukem 3D guns make the jump. The pistol, the shotgun, and the RPG are all here, as well as the trusty Mighty Boot. Even the enemies come over somewhat. The Pig Cop, Assault Trooper, Enforcer, and the Octobrain are all present and correct. You're tasked with traversing each of the levels, trying to find key cards and eventually escaping. All this is laid with Duke's one-liners and familiar sounds from the PC game. So it's a great package, right? Yeah, not even close. Everything I just described comes with an avalanche of caveats that undermine or diminish their inclusion entirely. Those 3 episodes I talked about, there's no boss enemies, and the levels themselves are so divorced from the original outings they might as well be called something else entirely. This isn't a 3D game. You don't get to walk around freely and engage with the environment. Instead, you move forward, backwards, and side to side, never able to turn around. You side-scroll through rooms until you bump into enemies who don't attack from a distance but instead slowly shuffle towards you and take shots. There is a slight attempt to make this interesting. Duke can shoot left and right, which makes shuffling an option if you don't want to get shot at. But the game lags so horrendously at points and with no warning that there's very little incentive to ever do that. Ever. Performance is terrible in general, but there are times when it gets semi-smooth and consistent, making it a tiny bit more playable. These moments are genuinely few and far between though. I will however applaud the attempt to dress the levels appropriately. Hollywood Holocaust has movie posters and a cinema that is very clearly defined. In Shrapnel City you enter a bar and see tables dotted around. In Hotel Hell you see the hotel sign, you enter through the hotel doors, and you even see plenty of other rooms in the hotel. There has been a basic attempt to make these spaces feel a bit more interesting, but the simple reality is they aren't. Every level here follows the exact same layout. You clear the room of enemies, shuffle until you can find a door at the end of the room, and then enter the next room. Sometimes there are corridors with monsters inside to break up the monotony, who you'll face off against one-on-one. In some rooms you'll find keycards, which are always used to open doors at the end of that room. Every level also has a loop that takes you back to an earlier point in the level, so you can clear up any enemies that you've missed. The amusing thing here is that the items you collected previously will all return for you to get again, including keys. The central gameplay loop isn't outright awful when you get used to it, but it definitely gets repetitive quickly. The game is riddled with oddities and bizarre occurrences. If you kill an enemy then shuffle to the side, that enemy will remain there until you return, leading to the hilarious sight of enemies dying a minute or two after you've dispatched them. The sounds in this game are also very low quality. Duke's voice lines come in very often here, playing after every kill, but good luck hearing them to the end. Any other noise in the game will cut him off instantly. There is music in the background, but it also gets cut off if any other sound clips play over it. When you finish the final mission in Shrapnel City, the game simply puts you back to the first level, like it expects you to keep playing in a massive loop. Perhaps the most maddening aspect of the game is that despite having 4 face buttons at the game's disposal, there is no dedicated open door button. Instead, you have to press the weapon switch button and forward at the same time to open any door. Why is this? It also needs to be said that the combat is very bleh, the weapons are just not that fun to use, and frankly the levels just start bleeding into each other once you've got to the 3rd level in an episode. The funny thing is that I remember seeing this back when I was a kid. Earlier I discussed those TV adverts that showcased the Gamecom, and one trick that they used to sell the console was speeding up the game footage to hide the terrible performance of its games. When you watch those commercials, Duke Nukem looks a lot quicker than it plays in reality. Overall, this is more of an amusing side note to the Duke Nukem franchise than anything else. Unfortunately, the Gamecom is just not a great games console, and Duke Nukem 3D is not a good fit even slightly. Despite all my complaints, the sad fact is that Duke Nukem 3D is one of the more playable games on the system, and even then, it really stretches the word playable. It's a curiosity for sure, but one that holds very little value in actually experiencing. It's a game that exists to shift consoles. It's the name that was important here. I would not recommend trying to play this one unless you are desperate to see Duke Nukem 3D incredibly slowed down, sounding at its worst, and with some of the absolute most hilarious voice clips. If you've never played this version of Duke Nukem 3D, then you're in for quite a treat here, because this is quite the wild ride that we're going to be embarking on here. The first thing though is I want you to listen to the main theme of this game. So there's going to be a lot of things about this version that I'm going to be talking about, but the main thing we'll talk about here at the start is that there aren't that many options to play around with here. Once you dive into the options menu, you're given the choice of inputting a password. There is no save system in this version of the game, or you can turn on and off the sounds. That's about it. You're not given much customization to play around with on this one, and to be honest, that's probably a good thing. There are 3 episodes here: LA Meltdown, Lunar Apocalypse, and Shrapnel City. There are 4 levels in each one. I've played all of them. They're all about the same as each other. The skill difficulty just adds more monsters into the mix. And we get these little sort of still images as we enter the episodes. So yes, this is Duke Nukem 3D on the Gamecom. Now, of course, you have to take the hardware into consideration when talking about ports like this, because obviously this was never going to come close to emulating the console and PC version of Duke Nukem 3D, but I think what is here, it actually looks okay. And I say that because the enemies look like the enemies from Duke Nukem 3D. The weapons don't look particularly similar. Like the shotgun there does not look like the shotgun from Duke Nukem 3D. But there are little touches like the fire hydrant there, the fact that you've got like street lamps over there. When we walk to the back wall here, you can see the movie poster. And yes, we can actually go inside the cinema here, which is exactly what we're going to do. This is how the game handles transitions. You basically have to open doors and walk through. And as you can see, the enemies sort of stumble up to us. They can walk backwards and forwards, and we basically just have to deal with them. The pig cops usually drop shells, while the assault troopers will drop ammo for the pistol. You can also see we can't see the back wall here. We can only see like what's on that back wall the closer we get to it. And obviously right here, we obviously cannot see because we are not close. You can see the little details and flourishes around, and I think that that's something that really helps here because it does make these rooms feel a bit more full. There's a sort of cola machine there, there's a movie poster, and then there's a door. We did just pick up a key card. Now, these corridors litter this game. Usually what happens, you can only walk forwards and backwards. When you reach a corner, the game will automatically turn you. You do not get to turn in this game. You basically can only go forwards and side to sides and backwards, but you never get to turn around. That noise there means that we're hitting something that means we can't pass through it, so we've got to go in a different direction. You can see the exit to the level is right there. There's also a door here. This door basically serves as a loop back to the start of a level, and this is kind of how the game gets around not letting you turn around. If you enter this door, and all of the levels have these doors by the exit, it basically lets you loop back to the start of a level. So if you've missed something or you want to go exploring, you can do just that.
Damn, I'm good.
One interesting quirk that comes about from this game is that items that you've already picked up, if you kind of do a loop around the level, they reappear. So you can theoretically leave each level with 100% health because medkits are usually placed right next to the end of the levels. And as you can see, we killed all the enemies in that first level, so yay me. So you can also see the enemies there with the rippers. Now, the thing is, they don't actually drop rippers in this version of the game, they just drop bullets for the pistol. There are only a handful of weapons in this one. There's the pistol, the shotgun, and the RPG. The RPG behaves in a very odd way, and I'll show that off in a little bit. It doesn't actually do any splash damage, and it doesn't really have any kind of explosion. It just kind of happens.
Damn, I'm good. Bitchin'.
It also doesn't help that this game has one of the most inconsistent performances I think I've ever seen in any first-person game. The reality is that even simply walking forward, it just doesn't feel smooth. Even moving like down these simple corridors, it just doesn't work. And when you're trying to fight enemies, in particular when there's more than one enemy barreling down on you, it can really kind of cause a lot of problems because you're trying to handle these enemies and the game's just kind of freaking out. And I have looked, even on real hardware, it behaved the same way. This game is just not a great performer. I did promise to show off the RPG, and this is this version of Duke Nukem's RPG. As you can see, you can stand right next to enemies and it will literally just kill them all in one. Now, ammo for the RPG is pretty scarce, so you don't really want to go around wasting it, but at the same time, it is insanely fun to just kind of walk up to these enemies and just blast them with the RPG, knowing that there's no actual payback for you at all. I think what doesn't help as well is the fact that it's really hard to kind of keep track of enemies because obviously they're moving around. If they kind of wander into a space you're not expecting, they can entirely just walk through you and try to attack you. It's very odd. The enemy behavior in this game, it's very simple, and unfortunately there isn't really much of a difficulty curve to this game. The Octobrain gets introduced in the third level, I think, in the first episode, and from there, the game doesn't really have anything new or interesting to give the player. It's really, really bizarre. Like, none of these levels are challenging, and I would argue that very few of them actually offer up anything really interesting. You can see that they have tried to dress this space up with some appropriate sort of theming. That looks like a front desk in a hotel. We are on the final level here. I also think that the step noise that Duke Nukem makes is just kind of stupid. Like, it's such an obnoxious sound. And the funny thing is that it actually interrupts all the other sounds in the game. So you can hear the music in the background trying to sort of get going, and that'll play, and it'll just completely stop that in its tracks. But yeah, there's no jumping, there's no crouching, there's no swimming, there's no underwater combat to speak of here. This is about as simple as you can get with a first-person shooter game. And I think this wouldn't be so bad to experience, like I said earlier, if the performance was just better. I feel like even with the sort of low bar that it tries to set itself, it really struggles to kind of, you know, just maintain consistency. And it's a shame because I think this doesn't look the worst. I feel that the black and white textures, even though it's not to everyone's taste, I think it's very tastefully done. Like, everything looks like it should look like, at least approximately. And you can definitely tell where you're meant to be. So as we're exploring the corridors here, you can see that you can tell what these are. Like, it's not like these are completely silly, you know, levels that you can't make head or tails of. Now, the layout of these levels is absolutely bonkers and ridiculous and really, really stupid in my opinion. It just feels like mazes that you can't back out of, and for me, I just don't think there's too much here to really get too excited about. The fact that this is an officially released product for Duke Nukem really is kind of the most interesting part of this, because this is technically the same story that Duke Nukem 3D is trying to tell, but I can't say I'd have been too thrilled if I'd been given this as a kid.
Damn, I'm good.
As much as we can poke fun and laugh at this version of Duke Nukem 3D, the reality is it is a very solid effort to bring this to the platform that it was trying. I love the fact, by the way, here that we're walking down the hotel corridor and you are seeing like hotel rooms on either side. It's clear that there was some effort made here to not make this be a complete, you know, waste of time for everyone. I do, however, feel that the ambition of this one is it just outscales the hardware massively, and bringing a first-person shooter to this console, I think, was just a bit outside of this console's reach. Let's be completely honest about that. It's actually not the worst game I've ever played. You can get about 10-15 minutes of decent fun out of this one before the novelty really wears off and the gameplay loop just becomes tedious and tired. But as you can see here, we've reached the end of the last episode, and when I try to exit the level, it's just going to kick me back to the start of the first one. And that just about sums up the effort in this one. There's no end bosses, there's nothing special to kind of mark your journey through the game. It basically just treats you like you've just started the game all over again. Would I recommend any Duke Nukem fans out there actually go and try to experience this? Absolutely not. I think that there is a novelty to playing this version, and that novelty really, really, really doesn't last all that long. Graphically, it is what it is. It does the best it can with the form factor that it's been placed into, and I do appreciate the fact that they tried to bring the Duke Nukem 3D experience across in the way that they did, but unfortunately, this is just too limited an experience, and the performance inconsistencies just make it absolutely ridiculous. Plus, the sounds, like the sounds, are so silly in this version. Let me know in the comments, did you ever play this version of Duke Nukem 3D? Is this a version that you've always wanted to play but never got around to? And if they were to ever re-release this, God knows why they would ever want to, would you ever go out of your way to try and experience it? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.